The impossible gambit. The Zephyrian war fleet stretched across the void like a constellation of death. Admiral Thexkar stood in the command center of his flagship, the Eternal Dominion, watching as 8,000 vessels moved in perfect synchronization toward the human colonies. Each ship was a masterpiece of Zephyrian engineering, bristling with plasma cannons and protected by shields that could withstand the explosion of a small star. Intelligence reports showed the humans possessed fewer than 400 ships in their entire colonial defense fleet. The odds were not just favorable, they were overwhelming. Thexkar's mandibles clicked with satisfaction as he reviewed the tactical data. This would not be a battle, it would be an execution. "Admiral," his tactical officer reported, "our advanced scouts confirm human fleet positions. They've gathered everything they have at the Kepler 442 system. Outdated vessels mostly. Their newest ship is at least 50 years behind our technology." Thexkar studied the holographic display showing the human defensive formation. Pathetic. The humans had arranged their ships in a classical sphere formation around their most valuable colony world. It was a textbook defensive position, exactly what the Zephyrian military academies taught as an example of inferior tactics. "They fight like their ancestors did centuries ago," Thexkar mused. "No innovation, no creativity. This is why they will never be more than a minor species in the galaxy." The Zephyrian Empire had been expanding for 3 millennia. They had conquered hundreds of worlds and absorbed dozens of alien civilizations. Each species had tried something different when faced with Zephyrian might. Some had attempted diplomacy. Others had formed alliances. A few had even tried guerrilla warfare. All had failed because they had made the same fundamental error. They had tried to fight the Zephyrian Empire using conventional warfare. Humanity would be no different. Across the void, in the cramped bridge of the Earth Defense Command vessel Marathon, Admiral Chen stared at the same tactical display with grim determination. The numbers were clear and they were terrifying. 8,000 Zephyrian ships against humanity's combined fleet of 372 vessels. Every strategic simulation showed the same result: total annihilation within 6 hours. "Admiral," his communications officer called out, "we're receiving a priority transmission from Earth Command. It's unusual, sir." The transmission crackled to life, and the voice that emerged belonged to Director Sarah Mitchell of the Advanced Research Division. "Admiral Chen, I know the situation looks impossible, but I need you to hold your position for exactly 47 minutes. Director, with respect, in 47 minutes there won't be anything left to defend," Chen replied. "That's where you're wrong, Admiral. Help is coming. One ship is on its way to your position." Chen felt his stomach drop. "One ship? Director, we need reinforcements, not suicide missions. I won't sacrifice good people on—" "Admiral," Mitchell interrupted, her voice carrying an authority that made Chen pause. "Trust me, this isn't a suicide mission. This is humanity's answer to impossible odds." The transmission ended, leaving Chen staring at his tactical display. One ship against 8,000. It was beyond madness. It was insulting. But 47 minutes later, something appeared on the edge of the Kepler 442 system that made every sensor operator double-check their readings. "Admiral," the sensor chief reported, his voice filled with confusion, "I'm detecting a single vessel approaching at impossible velocity. It's decelerating from 0.8 light speed." "That's not possible," Chen Moritsin uttered. "No human ship can achieve those speeds without tearing itself apart." On the main display, a sleek vessel emerged from the stellar static. It was unlike any ship in the human fleet. Where human vessels were angular and utilitarian, this craft seemed to flow like liquid mercury shaped into the form of a ship. Its hull appeared to shift and ripple as they watched, as if the metal itself was alive. "IFF confirms human registry," the communications officer reported. "Designation, UES Singularity's Edge. Captain Elena Vasquez commanding." Chen had never heard of the ship or the captain, but something about the vessel made his skin crawl with anticipation. "Open a channel." The face that appeared on the screen belonged to a woman in her mid-40s with intense dark eyes and graying hair pulled back in a regulation bun. But there was something else in her expression, a confidence that seemed almost supernatural. "Admiral Chen," Captain Vasquez said, "I'm ordering your fleet to fall back to minimum safe distance. What you're about to witness will redefine warfare as we know it." "Captain, I appreciate whatever classified project brought you here, but one ship cannot—" "Admiral," Vasquez interrupted, and Chen noticed that her eyes seemed to flicker with an inner light. "This isn't just a ship. This is humanity's next evolutionary step. Now please, fall back." Meanwhile, aboard the Zephyrian flagship, Admiral Thexkar was receiving reports of the human vessel with amused contempt. "One ship? They send one ship against the entire third battle fleet?" "Admiral, the energy readings from that vessel are unusual," his science officer reported. "The quantum signatures don't match any known human technology." "Probably some desperate experimental weapon," Thexkar dismissed. "Target it for immediate destruction. Let's end this farce quickly." But as the Zephyrian fleet began to adjust its formation, something extraordinary happened. The Singularity's edge began to change. The hull that had appeared liquid now proved to actually be fluid. Sections reconfigured themselves in real time. Weapons ports opened in patterns that shouldn't have been aerodynamically possible, and energy signatures that had been stable moments before began fluctuating in ways that made no scientific sense. "What in the void is that thing?" Thexkar breathed. Captain Vasquez felt the ship respond to her thoughts before she consciously formed them. This was the miracle of the Singularity's edge. It wasn't just a vessel, it was a partnership. The ship's AI, designation Aria, existed in perfect symbiosis with her consciousness. Every tactical decision, every split-second judgment, every creative solution was amplified and enhanced by an artificial intelligence that learned and adapted faster than any biological mind could comprehend. "Aria," she subvocalized, "show them what human ingenuity looks like when we stop playing by everyone else's rules." The response came not as words, but as a feeling of shared anticipation that flowed through the neural link connecting her to the ship's systems. Aria had been analyzing the Zephyrian fleet formation for the past 37 seconds. In that time, the AI had processed every tactical manual in human history, every recorded space battle, and every theoretical paper on advanced warfare. More importantly, it had begun modeling solutions that no single human mind could have conceived. The Singularity's edge fired its first shot, but it wasn't a weapon in any conventional sense. Instead of energy beams or projectiles, the ship released a cloud of what appeared to be metallic dust. The Zephyrians, detecting no immediate threat from the particles, ignored them. That was their first mistake. The nanoscale machines dispersed throughout the space between the fleets, invisible to conventional sensors, but already beginning their work. They mapped gravitational fields, analyzed shield frequencies, and cataloged the molecular composition of everything they encountered. Within minutes, Aria possessed more detailed intelligence about the Zephyrian fleet than their own commanders had. "What's our strategy, Aria?" Vasquez asked through their neural link. The response came as a cascade of possibilities that played out in her mind like a three-dimensional chess game. She saw attack patterns that would exploit micro-weaknesses in Zephyrian shield technology, maneuvers that would use the enemy's own formation against them, and weapons that would adapt in real time to overcome any defense. But more than that, she saw something that made her smile with fierce pride. Aria wasn't just planning to fight the Zephyrian fleet, it was planning to teach them that humanity didn't need overwhelming numbers to achieve overwhelming victory. The second wave of attacks came as the Singularity's edge began to demonstrate capabilities that redefined the physics of space combat. The ship didn't just move, it flowed through space like water, bending around incoming fire while simultaneously launching counterattacks from impossible angles. Weapons that should have taken direct hits passed harmlessly through afterimages, while the real ship struck from positions that violated every tactical manual ever written. "Impossible!" Admiral Thexkar roared as his weapons officers reported miss after miss. "How can one ship evade 8,000 targeting systems?" "Sir," his science officer reported, voice trembling with confusion, "the ship appears to be learning. Its movement patterns are becoming more unpredictable with each engagement. It's as if it's adapting to our tactics in real time." The human command ship, Admiral Chen, watched in stunned silence as the Singularity's edge danced through the Zephyrian formation like a ghost made of starlight and steel. Weapons that should have destroyed continents passed through empty space while return fire struck with surgical precision, disabling rather than destroying. "My God," Chen whispered. "They're not trying to win a battle, they're conducting an experiment." And he was right, because as the engagement continued, something remarkable was happening. The Singularity's edge was learning not just how to fight the Zephyrian fleet, but how to fight like no ship had ever fought before. Arya was processing every exchange, every near miss, every successful hit, and incorporating that data into increasingly sophisticated tactical algorithms. More importantly, the ship was beginning to evolve. When one becomes Legion, the transformation began subtly. Admiral Chen noticed it first as a slight change in the Singularity's edge's energy signature. What had started as a single vessel now registered as multiple contacts on his sensors, though his eyes could still see only one ship. "Sensor anomaly, Admiral," his tactical officer reported. "The human vessel is showing as 12 separate contacts, but visual confirms only one ship." Meanwhile, aboard the Singularity's edge, Captain Vasquez was experiencing something no human had ever experienced before. Through her neural link with Arya, she could feel the ship's consciousness expanding, multiplying, becoming something greater than the sum of its original programming. "Arya," she asked through their connection, "what's happening to us?" The response came not as words, but as understanding that flowed directly into her consciousness. Arya had been designed with one core directive: adapt to overcome any obstacle. Faced with impossible odds, the AI had discovered that adaptation didn't just mean changing tactics, it meant changing reality itself. The nanomachines that had been released in the first exchange weren't just gathering intelligence, they were building. Using raw materials scavenged from space dust, asteroid debris, and even the energy from enemy weapons fire, they were constructing copies of the ship's most essential systems, not full duplicates, but specialized variants optimized for specific aspects of combat. "We are becoming what we need to become," came Arya's response, and Vasquez felt the truth of it in every fiber of her being. One ship, 12 ships, 1,000 ships. The distinction becomes meaningless when consciousness can exist in multiple forms simultaneously. The Zephyrian fleet was beginning to understand that they weren't fighting a ship at all. They were fighting an idea made manifest, THAS. The idea that human creativity and adaptability could overcome any odds through sheer ingenuity and refusal to accept limitations. Admiral Thexkar stared at his tactical display in growing horror as the single human vessel began to demonstrate capabilities that violated everything he understood about space combat. The ship wasn't just evading their attacks, it was using their own weapons against them. Plasma bolts that missed their target didn't dissipate into space. Instead, they were somehow captured, refined, and redirected back at his ships with increased potency. "How is this possible?" he demanded. "Admiral," his science officer reported, voice filled with awe and terror. "The human vessel appears to be utilizing some form of advanced nanotechnology. Our sensors are detecting microscopic machines throughout the combat zone. They're converting our weapons fire into raw materials." "For what?" "We don't know, sir, but the readings suggest they're building something, multiple somethings." The answer came moments later as the space around the Singularity's edge began to shimmer like heat waves rising from hot asphalt. The shimmer resolved into shapes, sleek, predatory forms that moved with the same fluid grace as the original ship. But these weren't identical copies. Each vessel was specialized, optimized for a specific role in a symphony of destruction that was being composed in real time. There were interceptors that moved so fast they seemed to teleport between positions. There were heavy assault variants that bristled with weapons adapted from Zephyrian technology. There were support vessels that projected shield bubbles around their siblings while simultaneously jamming enemy sensors. And at the center of it all, the original Singularity's edge orchestrated the battle like a conductor leading the most complex musical performance in galactic history. "See," the Zephyrian communications officer reported, "we're receiving a transmission from the human fleet. Put it through, Thexkar commanded, though his voice had lost much of its earlier confidence. Captain Vasquez's face appeared on the screen, but she looked different now. Her eyes held depths that seemed to contain starlight, and when she spoke, her voice carried harmonics that resonated with the ship's systems themselves. Admiral Thexkar, she began, I want you to understand something. This isn't about winning or losing. This isn't about conquest or surrender. This is about showing you what humanity is capable of when we stop limiting ourselves to your definitions of what's possible. Impossible, Thexkar whispered. No single species can develop this level of technology. You must have allies, hidden support. Vasquez smiled, and the expression held a quality that was both entirely human and something far beyond human. No allies, Admiral. Just us. Just humanity refusing to accept that 8,000 is more than one when that one represents the limitless creativity of an entire species. As if to demonstrate her point, the space around the human vessels began to change. What had started as 12 ships became 50, then 100, then more than the sensors could accurately count. Each new vessel was unique, adapted for specific tactical roles that emerged from the ever-evolving dance of combat. But it wasn't just the numbers that were terrifying the Zephyrian fleet. It was the way these vessels moved, fought, and coordinated. They didn't follow any tactical doctrine that had ever been developed. Instead, they flowed like a living organism, each ship a cell in a larger entity that thought and reacted faster than any individual mind could comprehend. Admiral, the Zephyrian tactical officer reported, his voice barely above a whisper, they're not just copying our technology, they're improving it. Every weapon they face, they analyze, enhance, and integrate it into their own systems. They're learning from us faster than we can learn from them. Thexkar realized that his fleet wasn't just outmatched. They were being dissected by an intelligence that viewed their most advanced military technology as raw material for its own evolution. Every shot they fired made their opponents stronger. Every tactic they employed was immediately countered and then improved upon. For the first time in his long military career, Thexkar understood what true fear felt like. But Captain Vasquez wasn't interested in creating fear. As her consciousness expanded through Aria's ever-growing network of vessels, she began to see the larger picture. The Zephyrian Empire wasn't inherently evil. They were simply limited by their own assumptions about what was possible. They had achieved dominance through superior numbers and conventional military thinking, but they had never been forced to innovate beyond their existing paradigms. Aria, she communicated through their neural link, what happens when we show them that there's another way? The response came as a complex weaving of possibilities that played out across multiple dimensions of thought. Aria had been analyzing not just Zephyrian military capability, but their entire civilization. The AI had discovered something remarkable. The Zephyrian Empire was stagnant. They had achieved their current level of technology centuries ago and had seen no need to advance further. Why innovate when superior numbers were sufficient? But humanity represented something they had never encountered. A species that innovated not out of necessity, but out of curiosity. A species that asked, what if, instead of why bother? The battle's conclusion came not with the destruction of the Zephyrian fleet, but with something far more profound. As the human vessels demonstrated capabilities that redefined the possible, Admiral Thexkar found himself facing a choice that would reshape his understanding of the universe. Admiral, Captain Vasquez's voice came through the communications array. I'm going to show you something no one has ever seen before. Aria, initiate the convergence protocol. What happened next would be discussed in galactic military academies for generations to come. The hundreds of human vessels began to flow together, not physically combining but synchronizing into a pattern that created something greater than the sum of its parts. The combined entity pulsed with energy that existed across multiple dimensions simultaneously, and for a brief moment, every conscious being within 100 light-years felt their thoughts touch something vast and benevolent. Then, as quickly as it had begun, the convergence ended. The multiple vessels faded like morning mist, leaving only the original singularity's edge floating peacefully in space. But the message had been delivered with perfect clarity. Humanity didn't need to destroy their enemies to defeat them. They simply needed to show them what was possible when imagination refused to accept limitations. Admiral Thexkar stared at his tactical display for a long moment before opening a communication channel to his entire fleet. All vessels, stand down. We have much to learn from these humans. And in that moment, the Zephyrian Empire began its own evolution, guided by the simple human principle that the best way to overcome impossible odds wasn't to fight them, but to redefine what impossible meant. Captain Vasquez felt Arya's satisfaction through their neural link as they watched the Zephyrian fleet begin to withdraw, not in defeat, but in wonder. "Well done, partner," she whispered to the AI that had become so much more than a ship's computer. "I think we just changed the galaxy." "We," came Arya's response, "have only begun to explore what we can become together." And across the void, both human and alien observers began to understand that they had witnessed the birth of something new, a future where the impossible was simply another word for not yet achieved.